just really right now to start off with some greetings there, remarks. Thanks for coming, everybody. It's great to see everybody. Some of you I met down in Canton this year. Other than that, there you go on. You have to lead it a little bit, so we're letting you come up and say your remarks real quick if you'd like to. Or you can say them right there. You don't even have to come up.
I bring thanks to happy presents, grace, around my own personal grace, and it's very nice to see some of your faces, and I hope you all have a wonderful year, and everything like that. Thank you.
You know, you stand with me for the pledge of allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which stands one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Paul Logan, candidate chaplain, the invitation.
Dear God, we thank you for this food, for the company we share, and for all of your blessings. May this food nourish our bodies and strengthen our spirits. Amen.
Sure. We'll go round robin in the room. Let everybody introduce themselves. I'll introduce myself first. I am Bill Dixon, Secretary, Camp 8.
I'm Fred Warren, commander of our group. Scott Lowe, Junior Vice Commander of Camp 15, Junior Vice Commander of 503. Greg Klein, Past Commander of Camp 503 and 15 and Past Department.
Andy Good, transport at President of Carlisle's Auxiliary, and also a member of Gettysburg's Auxiliary.
Doug Miller, Past Department Commander, currently Commander of Camp 15 Carlisle. Baker, Past Camp Commander of Wayne Wagner, Department of Camp 15 Secretary. I'm Mike Peter, I'm the Camp Commander of Camp 101 at Capital, and Fischer also a board member in the Most Camp. I'm currently the Senior Vice Commander of the Passenger Department. Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Tom Ferguson. I'm a dual member of Camp 15 and Commander in the Baker Fischer Camp. I'm the HIM instructor and the Camp Council. I'm Chris Carter, Past Department Secretary Treasurer, also Class Camp 273. Timothy Whitney, Past Camp Commander, also Class Camp 273, and Junior Vice Commander, Pennsylvania Department. John McDowell, Joe Class Camp 273, with Tom. Past Department Commander and a dual member in Baker Fischer. I have always been here for 400 years. I'm the chaplain of the Gettysburg Camp Week spring. I'm no Chamberlain. I don't talk on television. I'm Scott Peters. I'm the I'm Doug Cook, Camp Commander of Camp 504, Wilson, PA.
Dale Becker, Past Commander of Camp 8.
Tuesday Bennett, Secretary, Housekeeping Camp, 504, Mercer.
And their lovely wife.
And my wife, Fred.
Well, I'm from Auxiliary number 10, Scranton. Ladies Auxiliary.
7 past Camp Commander as a Griffin Camp 8 in Grand Scranton.
Today's Camp Commander, Lieutenant Ezra Griffin. How's it going? Right up? Yeah. I'm going to talk about some stuff.
So Fischer, my commander, they were some pretty well months. Who's counting? My lovely wife Sue and my twin sister Kathy from Philly. We never fought as kids.
I'd like to introduce my wife Alessandra, and more importantly, thank her for the centerpieces, the programs, and keeping Jerry and I in line during this whole process of getting this set up. So, we wish her.
Here's your taxes.
And then, I guess at this point, we'll let Cooper get everything opened up. We'll eat. So we'll do the.
It looked like a good seafood market. Here was this little Mexican bodega. But it was good. It was good for seafood, but I thought it was like going to be like a big.
It's half and half, too, so it's half white.
Assistant social studies teacher. I teach at Scranton High School down the road. I teach government, I teach law to juniors and seniors. EJ teaches at a charter school here in the Scranton area. He also works on a house. I also work in a different program called the American Exchange Project, where we exchange students from around the country to other cities around the country. This summer, I have 10 students from Scranton High School going to literally 10 different cities around the United States for free. And this is all bought and paid for by someone you probably have heard of, and his name is David McCullough III. Okay, he's my boss. So he has started this nonprofit to bring kids, and then I'm going to welcome 10 kids to Scranton this summer to show them our community. So with that, in the summer, I got to bring them up there to see EJ's presentation, and to say I learned a lot would have been an understatement. So it's impressive to see how well our students come and to call him a friend, and appreciate him obviously being here today. So EJ, the floor is yours, sir.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I'll go to the front here because I do have a little presentation that I put together for everyone. First of all, thank you, Jerry. Thank you both for having me. It's an honor to speak to this group today. The Sons of Union Veterans, along with the predecessor Grand Army of the Republic, are two organizations that I have a lot of respect and admiration for. So to be able to be here today at an important event for and a very important commander. You got a lot of badges, so that usually tells me that you're up there in importance in command. So again, it's just an honor to be here today. Just a little bit about our program first before I get into it. I'm going to try to talk a little bit about some Civil War history and then how it kind of connects to the program and what our program is trying to achieve. The Destination Freedom Walking Tour program started as a self-guided walking tour. You would show up to the Waverly Community House, you would pick up a map, and then you could go and walk around the town on your own. We started to see that there was a program, so we started offering guided tours. As Jerry said, I'm a social studies teacher here in Scranton, so my curriculum aligned with our walking tour. So when we started to see that there was interest, I said, hey, I can help out. So our walking tour grew. We added the special exhibitions gallery, which you can see right in the bottom right-hand corner there. It's sort of almost like a little museum type room that has a lot of artifacts and stuff related to the Civil War era. And we were added in 2022, we were added to the National Park Service's National Underground Railroad Network to Freedom Program. So we are a National Park Service affiliate. Again, our program, the story centers around the story of the Underground Railroad and then its connections to the broader Civil War era. And that's what I'm going to talk about today. As you can see here, the Waverly's history is not something that we just recently discovered a couple years ago when our program started. These are maps from Wilbur Seibert's 1898 study of the Underground Railroad, and you can see Waverly right there with the Stroudsburgs, Wilkes-Barre, Montrose to the north. You have towns like Towanda here in northeastern Pennsylvania that are going to be involved, and that story is what our program is, again, centered around. The story is kind of centered around
the man whose headstone you can see here, George Keyes. And you can see, I'm going to get to his wartime service in a little bit here, but he was a member of the 22nd United States Colored Troops Regiment. George Keyes was the first formerly enslaved person to navigate the Underground Railroad and actually settle in Waverly. As I'm sure some of you probably know, Canada, for a lot of former slaves, was the ultimate destination. Waverly was kind of just a stopping point for some people. But Keyes decided that it was a safe enough place that he could put roots down. Robin Sisson, whose headstone you can also see here, and both of these headstones are part of our tour. We actually go to the cemeteries where these are. And Robin Sisson is the Waverly resident. He's one of Waverly's foremost abolitionists and anti-slavery advocates. And Sisson was part of Waverly's Underground Railroad network. And Sisson actually hid George Keyes from slave catchers here in northeastern Pennsylvania. So we start with that, and then we get into, well, what happens afterwards? Because for a lot of people, the story of the Underground Railroad is they were slaves, they used this system, they got somewhere, they were free, and the story is over. Well, that story doesn't end when they get to a place like Waverly. As you can see from George Keyes' story here, 22nd USCT, he settles in Waverly in the mid-1840s. So his story is going to continue on beyond when he decides that he's going to put roots down in our little town. Now, the issues of slavery's expansion, and things related to that are going to bubble up over time, and eventually the Civil War breaks out. I don't know if you guys know about this. There's a big war that fought in the United States. And it's a lot of spaces in the election of Abraham Lincoln and the policies of the Republican Party. Well, when the war breaks out, African-American men are barred from military enlistment. African-American men cannot serve in the military, even though there is a large contingent of Northerners, free blacks, who want to serve. Right? Frederick Douglass, right, from Dale, I hope a name that we all are familiar with. Frederick Douglass, from the beginning of the war, is advocating for enlistment of African-American men. Not everyone is thrilled about Lincoln's election here in northeastern Pennsylvania. Dallas, Pennsylvania attempted to secede from the government of northeastern Pennsylvania. Okay? This is a real thing. Okay? So you have these mixed reactions to what's going on. Okay? You have mixed reactions to the issues surrounding the war. You have mixed reactions to Lincoln's election. And it kind of complicates this story of the United North, right? This fully united Northern front that's going to fight and save the Union. There's a lot of truth in that, obviously, as I hope you all know. But there were Northerners who were not so thrilled about this prospect of a war to preserve the Union, especially was going to end the fact on the institution of slavery. You know where this is? Okay. William Wayne, Antietam. So the war starts to get gruesome. Casualty numbers start to build. All right, we have the single bloodiest day of the American Civil War at Antietam Creek in Maryland, and this is where we start to see the kind of official shift from the Lincoln administration saying we are now going to have progress towards the abolition of slavery. Scranton, as I'm sure you all well know, is very well represented on the Antietam battlefield. This is the monument at Bloody Lane to the 132nd Pennsylvania Infantry, featuring 2 Scrantonians. So this is one thing we do. We do a lot of battlefield work with my students in my classes, and we try to tie these big stories that we all hear to our local history, to our shared story here in northeastern Pennsylvania. And the fact that we have 2 Scrantonians on one of the most gruesome parts of any Civil War battlefield anywhere is pretty telling. And the fact that this battle made Lincoln think that he now had the military clout to issue his Emancipation Proclamation is going to be a big step in the progress of the war in terms of emancipation. As the Union is going to make their way through Southern territory after Lincoln's Emancipation Proclamation is issued, the Union Army, in a lot of respects, is going to become an army of liberation. As they move through the South, they're going to read the Emancipation Proclamation to enslaved people in the South, as you can see here in this print from, I believe, 1863. And this is where you're going to start to see the honest recruitment of African-American soldiers during the war. The first unit that is going to be recruited in the North, we know what this is? I first northern black unit accepted by the Lincoln administration. Robert Gould Shaw, the unit's commander, and you can see the ranks marching behind him. This unit is something that is well known. I'm sure most of us have seen the movie Glory here, which is what shed light on a lot of people, the idea of African American enlistment during the war. But what a lot of people don't realize, and this is something that every time I watch this movie now, it gives me a little bit of a new perspective on it, was the connections that Northeastern Pennsylvania has to the 54th Massachusetts. Buried in Waverly, as part of our tour, we talk about Samuel Thomas, one of the members of the 54th Massachusetts Infantry. He was a formerly enslaved resident of Waverly. Post-war years, he makes his way kind of between Binghamton and Waverly. And we have his story along with a slew of other African-American men, both freeborn and formerly enslaved, who resided in Waverly and are buried in Waverly. And that's, again, kind of one of the big centers of our story. Montrose, Pennsylvania is another town very heavily represented in the 54th Massachusetts. Montrose had 14 individuals who were accepted into this regiment. I had actually read accounts of more men going to enlist who were actually denied service. So again, this big national story that a lot of people know about, people don't realize we have a very direct connection to it here in Northeastern Pennsylvania, and I think that's important. So to go back to George Keyes. George Keyes is going to enlist with his son and a contingent of about 6 other men from Waverly who are going to join the 22nd United States Colored Troops Infantry. Again, we talk about different units on our tour and as part of our program, but the 54th and the 22nd are probably the two that we focus on the most. Again, the 22nd has quite a few Waverly residents who are going to fight in this unit. Okay? Again, we have 6 men here. Not all formerly enslaved, but some are. Okay, some are freeborn in Waverly, including George Keyes, who you can see the first one here, and his son, George Keyes Jr., who is actually buried in Dunmore Cemetery. So, in Dunmore Cemetery, you probably come across his headstone. The 22nd is going to be involved in some of the most important events towards the end of the war. Most importantly for them, the initial attacks on Petersburg during the Oberlin campaign and Ulysses S. Grant's campaign to try to take the Confederate capital of Richmond. When Grant finds out that taking Richmond head-on is a little more difficult than he planned on, he focuses on Petersburg. And Petersburg is going to end up in a siege, but the initial attacks on Petersburg, some of the few successful attacks, are going to be by USCT regiments, including the 22nd. They get mentioned in Frank Leslie's Illustrated Newspaper, so if you're familiar with that, Harper's Weekly, some of the most famous periodicals of the time, they get a lot of shout-out newspapers. How many of you have ever been to West Point? I was going to say, I hope that we get a bit of another big hand raise here. The painting on the right-hand side there actually still hangs in the West Point Museum to this day, and that is the 22nd USCT charging Confederate works outside of Petersburg. So those 6 men that you just saw their muster rolls for, they were a part of that attack. Now, this is going to get, like I said, a lot of attention. It's going to start to kind of change the hearts and minds of especially people in the military that previously had thought that black men just cannot make capable soldiers, right? When the debates about African-American enlistment are going on, you have white soldiers basically saying, we will leave the Army before we serve on a battlefield with black troops. And the 22nd USCT and some of these other African-American regiments are going to, again, start to change kind of the narrative. And again, this is one of the things that we kind of highlight as part of our program. This is the 22nd's regimental flag, which, again, the imagery here, all right, this is an African-American soldier at the point of bayonet forcing the surrender of a Confederate soldier. This is the flag that they actually took on the battlefield with them. So imagine a unit of formerly enslaved men and freeborn African-American men, some of whom are going back down south to places that they were held in slavery, and this is the image you choose to bring on the battlefield with you. All right? Talk about sending a message. I'd like to point out the phrase at the top, which I'm sure you are all familiar with, Sic Semper Tyrannis, state motto of the state of Virginia to this day. Also what John Wilkes Booth yells when he jumps off the stage at Forest Theater after shooting Abraham Lincoln in the back of the head. This always lends to a great discussion about interpretation with my groups on our tour. Who do you think the 22nd thought the tyrants were? This image tells a pretty clear picture. Who do you think John Wilkes Booth thought the tyrant was? Interpretation. But with the capture of Petersburg, you have a lot of military events that are going to lead to Lincoln's re-election in 1864. These soldiers of the Army of the Potomac and the Army overall are going to vote very heavily in favor of Abraham Lincoln, again, kind of sending a message about what they were fighting for, the preservation of the Union. And at this point, in 1864, there is the movement to end slavery. Okay? Now, is every soldier in the Army fighting for that? No. But the Army still sustained Lincoln even after issuing the Emancipation Proclamation, even after enlisting African American troops, things like the Confiscation Acts and all sorts of things. The war is going to eventually end, and these soldiers are going to return home. This is one of, from the archives of the Susquehanna County Historical Society, this is one of my all-time favorite Civil War era photographs. This is Montrose, Pennsylvania, and if you are from the area, if you've been to Montrose recently or really ever, you know that this street looks exactly like it does in this picture.
Minus the horses.
Minus the horses, yeah, exactly. Minus the horses, but pretty much everything else is the same. This is an image of members of the 54th Massachusetts and the 6th United States Colored Troops Regiment returning from the war front in 1865. So again, this is not an uncommon scene, big return parades for soldiers, but in Montrose, members of the 54th and the 6th USCT, when you think of local black history, I don't think Montrose really comes into mind, right? But this is, again, like I said, one of my favorite wartime images. One of the soldiers who's going to return home from the war is Waverly's Richard Lee of the 25th USCT. Okay, and again, he's a formerly enslaved resident. He actually resided in Dallas, and in the Dallas secession movement, they mentioned this guy as being one for the Union. Okay, and they deride him for it. He eventually moves to Waverly, but he's a member of the 25th, and the reason I'm bringing up the 25th is because Frederick Hitchcock, who I mentioned before, one of the guys, the Scrantonians, on the monument at Antietam, after the 132nd is mustered out of service, he is going to re-enlist, and he's going to eventually become the commander of the 25th USCT. And the 25th is going to have one of these big return parades in Philadelphia when they return from the war front. And they present the regimental flag of the 25th USCT to the Union League of Philadelphia, whose building still stands in Center City. Again, so you have these northeastern Pennsylvanians who I think are often, we think of our area and the story of the Civil War in our area, these guys are kind of left out in a lot of ways, so that's one of the things our program tries to highlight. Now, in the post-war years, you have the formation of the GAR, all right, and then obviously later on, Sons of Union Veterans. Waverly actually had its own GAR post, and the GAR post was named for Sergeant George O. Fell of the 143rd Pennsylvania Infantry. The Fell home, which you can see here, not the one with the red door, but the one right next to it, the Fell home still stands in our town and is part of our tour. And in Waverly's Hickory Grove Cemetery, you can see that he has a memorial tablet. The Fell family was one of Waverly's anti-slavery advocate families. Okay, and the Fells, two of their sons, George and his brother Asher, are going to serve in the 143rd. And Waverly's GAR post is named after him because George Fell died at the Battle of Gettysburg. And his final resting place, even though he has a memorial tablet in our cemetery there in Waverly, his final resting place is Gettysburg National Cemetery. Just yards from where Lincoln gave his Gettysburg address, talking about a new birth of freedom, talking about all that. So again, this little town, all right, that you would never think would have any sort of association with these huge events is at kind of the center of a lot of it, which I think is pretty fascinating. My clicker's gonna work here. There we go. And again, you have GAR posts that pop up all throughout the state of Pennsylvania, including here in Scranton, Pennsylvania. Waverly and Scranton's GAR posts were two of the, I won't say few, there were a few throughout the state, but some of the minor integrated posts in the state. The headquarters of Scranton's GAR post was located, as I'm sure you all know, right in downtown Scranton, okay, at what is now Harry's Bar. So if you want to have a beer after this and celebrate the GAR, that's probably a good place to do it. You see a memorial tablet for the GAR on the side of the building. One of the members of Scranton's integrated GAR post was a man named Max Merriweather of the 24th USCT. And another formerly enslaved man whose story is a little convoluted, but he navigated the Underground Railroad to northeastern Pennsylvania and enlisted in the 24th USCT. Right? He is also buried in, this is not Dunmore, it's Forest Hill Cemetery, right? I think that's what it's called. So right next to Dunmore Cemetery. Jackson Merriweather and some of these USCT veterans are going to use their wartime service in the post-war years to advocate for civil rights, particularly the right to vote, which is another thing that's kind of at the center of our program, because voting rights, there were a couple of voting rights issues here in northeastern Pennsylvania that kind of showed the racial aspect of what was going on here at the time. But these guys are going to advocate for civil rights based off their military service. They're going to say, we fought for this country, we died for this country, we deserve the full rights of a citizen of this country. It's going to be a long fight. It's not until the 1870s that the 15th Amendment is passed, right, that denies someone from being denied the right to vote based off of their skin color. But this is going to be the center of the story. George Keyes Jr. of the 22nd is going to be one of those local advocates for black civil rights. Not only is he going to be a member of Scranton's integrated GAR post, but he is going to be involved in certain political circles. If you're familiar, again, locally with Ira Tripp, he was the coachman for Ira Tripp. And you can see him here at a reunion at Nail Park. Right, and you can see one of the interesting things about this photo, I don't know if you guys can see this, but the two white veterans who are in this photograph have their names and ages. George Keyes, color. Okay. One of the things we also talk about is in the post-war years is how were people like George Keyes viewed in the local community. Very interesting to see how papers talk about prominent black men. But again, they're going to use that status as prominent men in the community to advocate again for civil rights. And again, it's going to be a long fight, and eventually it happens. Now, the Civil War is commemorated all throughout the country. And here in northeastern Pennsylvania, right here in downtown Scranton, we have what is one of my, and I'm not being biased here just because I'm from the area, but this is one of my favorite Civil War monuments that I've ever come across. And this is the monument in downtown Scranton. I was able to find the newspaper clippings from the dedication ceremony of this monument, and it's a quote that I like to end a lot of my talks on because it tells a lot about what people thought about the war and how people reflected on what the war was all about. At the monument dedication, Judge Alfred Dart, a local veteran of the Army of the Potomac, is going to give a speech where he's going to say, as you can see here, this monument tells that everyone in this country is free and equal. There was never such a war as that. There was never such a country as this. This monument will in time crumble away, but the memory of the men to whom it is erected will live forever. Pretty powerful stuff. And it's one of the reasons I love this quote, because I know I'm going to be talking to Civil War buffs here today. And it's something that I think that we can all reflect on when we think about what the war meant, why we're all here, why we are having this meeting in the first place. What did that conflict mean? And I think Judge Alfred Dart summed it up pretty well here. And again, he's speaking not just for himself, he's speaking for the men like George Keyes and Jackson Merriweather of the USCT units. And again, this is something that I think is important when we think about what the war was all about and what does it mean for us today, okay, when it comes to this idea of free and equal, right? And it's an important thing to reflect on. I think about it every time I drive by or walk by this monument. So that is a little bit about our program, a little bit about the Civil War here in northeastern Pennsylvania, and I don't want to take up any more of your time because I know we have some roasting from what I hear.
Yeah, I'm going to bring the spit out.
Yeah, I don't want to hold up that anymore, so thank you very much all for having me here. It's an honor to speak to this group.
Go ahead, Jerry, you can start it off.
Who's got the face king brush?
So when they told me what this was about, I was like, okay. But I have to say some nice things about Bill first, okay? And I know this is going to be hard to believe, but I have some nice things to say about Bill. I'll pay you later. On the salary I make, then I'm going to be better paid. When I became commander, there was two people who really stood by my side and got me through everything. And the first one was Bob Schaefer, whom I owe a tremendous debt of gratitude to, and I'm sure many of you know Bob Schaefer. When Bob stepped down as treasurer, as secretary, Bill said, and the deep conversations that him and I had all the time, to this day, mean so much to me, because without him by my side, I'm not sure I ever would have been able to hold the camp together, because we were at each other's throats for a while. It was not good. And the GAR, and there was a lot of infighting. And my goal was, no matter what, was to keep us together and to make sure that we could mend all fences. And after 4 years, and thanks to Bill and to Bob Schaefer, that was able to happen. And that's why they're still here, and it's his guidance alongside was tremendous. And for that, I owe you a huge debt of gratitude. It was great to stand next to you and to be at your service back in June, and I thank you for that. There's only one problem I've ever had with Bill. And the worst part happened on January 20th of this year, when Ohio State beat Notre Dame. As a long-time Notre Dame fan, okay, it was crushing to me to lose to Ohio State. I'm happy for my friend. But I found out also today how big of an Ohio State fan he is, because I didn't know this until I saw him parking his car. And his seatbelt said Ohio State. So, thank you. Congratulations to Ohio State, or to, well, I should say, congratulations to you and to your team. But again, thank you so much.
So mine is really quick, actually, because shockingly, I have only been with our organization for a little over a year. I did not even know our organization existed. I did some digging for Civil War ancestry. Lucky enough, I found I had 4 ancestors that served during the war, 3 of which actually died during the war. 2 as Civil War or as Confederate POWs, and 1 in the 143rd. Find out Jerry is the camp commander. I reach out to Jerry. He shoots me to Bill, and Bill and I pretty much hit it off instantly. He's a really easygoing guy to talk to, as many of us know. However, unbeknownst to me, he was feeling me out, and within 2 months of being a member of the Suns, I was drafted into the secretary role at camp number 8. So other than that, I can honestly say, Bill, it's been a privilege not only to be a decampment and watch you get sworn in as commander, but all the help you've given me, because there's been a lot of calls when I took over as secretary to get me this position. So I was really happy that I could do this for you and stand by you. So thanks, Bill. Floor is open for anyone else.
You have to pay for all of that.
There we go. We'll do our presentation now. Well, Bill, congratulations you on your years department commander. We really appreciate all the work that you've done. You've come out west, Isaac Eaton Camp, and Fischer, ceremony around all of our veterans family, and you came out to install our officers. And you cut here this past year, so you put a lot of miles on. And we really appreciate it, all the work we're going to do. And we'd like to present this then from the camp for you. Should I open it? Yeah, you can. Very, very kind. Yeah, it's amazing. More than dollars. Fabulous. Thanks. All right. Thank you. right out to the West Road and have a nice lunch in April Grove.
It is, if anybody else has anything.
Okay. Before I get started on saying anything, I have a certificate for General GPS Program 3 that I presented as the Department of Registration Officer at last year's camp. For various reasons, we were not able to have anyone attend. And then I went out for their joint holiday luncheon in Sunbury with Heart Ramp Camp 15 in December and forgot to bring it. And then last month, when they held the Lincoln Luncheon in Sunbury, I forgot to bring it. And I was...
Did you bring it today?
I'll still give you a lot of sequence.
Are you sure you don't want to keep it?
Pennsylvania Department, in recognition of exemplary work done in advancing our mission, does hereby present a Graves Registration Certificate of Achievement to General J.P.S. Coben, Camp 503, which by diligent research and yeoman effort has actively reached beyond their home county to honor the last Civil War veterans of Lycoming, Montour, Northumberland, Snyder, and Union counties. In testimony thereof and by authority as Department Graves Registration Officer, I do hereby confer this certificate presented January 29th, 2024 and March 22nd, 2025. You two would come up, Greg stepped out, we get a picture, and when you get on, Fred,
I'd like to say one thing. Bill always has something for us to do. Go ahead.
Thank you for your leadership. Thanks, Scott. Boy, now that I have an empty binder here, I feel very good. Okay. Some of you know that I am retired from the Air Force and then taught high school in Columbus, Ohio for 7 years and then joined the National Park Service. And retired in 2020 as the Chief Ranger of Steamtown. During the 8.5 years or so that we've been here in Scranton, I've had the pleasure of meeting EJ, in the past. At our Memorial Day service in Dunmore Cemetery at the GAR plot, I don't know when it was, 2019 maybe, pre-COVID, I gave the keynote address one year on the U.S. colored troops. And it was very nice that I had a band member from the Dunmore High School band come up and say she really appreciated learning about the USCT and the local connection. And then next year that we were able to get EJ to give the presentation. And then a year or two after that, a couple of years ago, who's the Philadelphia newspaper guy that wrote the books?
Jim Remsen, yeah.
I'm sorry?
Jim Remsen.
Yeah, Jim Remsen. He came up and gave a talk. He wrote a very good book that highlights that connection that we talked about, but also that it really enhanced my presentation with the USCT because we like to think of ourselves on the Union side as the virtuous fighters for liberty and freedom, but Pennsylvania was extremely divided. They built a hall in Philadelphia, and they were going to open it up and have abolitionist speakers show up. And before that could happen, the crowd on the other side burned it down. Luzerne County, which Lackawanna County was part of back then, it was almost evenly split, 50-50 in voting. And there were plenty of copperheads up here. And so, it's important that we honor the boys in blue for the sacrifice and their families that they all made. But we also need to acknowledge that, a lot of the junior enlisted guys in the South were fighting for their homes. They weren't fighting for slavery. In that patriarchal society, it was a very difficult position that many of them were in. So while I had plenty of disagreements with the CSA, and especially their leadership, we can't cast everyone into the same mix. It's a tough situation, and but our job is to honor the boys in blue, and we do that well. And this is where the Sons started, in Pennsylvania, and we have a great legacy, a great heritage that I'm proud to have continued on with that. And I know that we had many past department commanders here that carried the torch during their time. We have Mike and Ted will be stepping up for leadership in the coming later this year for Mike and soon after with Ted. So all we can do is do what we can, right? I mean, you go to some cemeteries and you see the wife, and her epitaph is, she did what she could, and it's kind of like, wow. But we all need to do what we can, and it's been an honor. This has been a difficult week. This has been as you saw, General Order 15 came out from Commander-in-Chief Martin that has revoked the charter for Owl Camp 45 in Northampton County. And, we don't want that to happen. Fortunately, we've had 2 new camps form in the past year. We had another one forming. If you've taken a look on the back table, you've seen a couple of national awards that this department has received over the last several years for the most new members. And, that's a testament. We also we've earned the national award for the most new members under the age of 40. And we know how vital that is because, one generation needs to pass the torch to the next. So we've lost a lot of members over the last 3 or 4 years. We're gaining new members, we're gaining new camps, and the folks that remain are by and large dedicated to the cause. Many of the camps are going beyond their home county to do last veteran recognition in neighboring counties, and that's wonderful. We need to do what we can. I had the honor to work with Gita at the Waverly House in my role with the National Park Service, kind of pro bono on the side, if you will, helping them edit and revise their Underground Railroad Network, the Freedom application, because before we moved here, I was the historian at Fort Scott National Historic Site in southeast Kansas, and drafted the Underground Railroad Network, the Freedom application for our site as a site, which is centered on the old parade ground and surrounding buildings, the infantry barracks, dragoon barracks, and the officers' quarters, quartermaster storehouse, etc. When that fort was active, 1842 to 1853. It closed because we got all that territory in the Southwest after the Mexican-American War. And that idea of a permanent Indian frontier, keep moving all the eastern Indians into that wasteland called the Great Plains, all of a sudden it was decided that there were better things to do with that land, I guess, so the permanent Indian frontier went away. Fort Scott closed in 1853, and that's the same year that Fort Riley opened in central Kansas, and it's still an active Army garrison today. One thing I will point out, that I'm not dissing the service of the 54th Massachusetts, because they were thorough. And I always try and point out, when I talk about the USCT, they don't deserve any more recognition than any other soldier who served, whether they were in combat or guarding the tunnels in Gallitzin to keep the Pennsylvania Railroad open during the war, or guarding POW camps at Elmira, as horrible as that was. But they don't deserve any less. And it's been easy for folks over the last 150 years to give them less of their due. So I enjoy learning and talking about the United States Colored Troops. At Fort Scott, we were able to get in the Underground Railroad network of freedom because Fort Scott, even though it closed in 1853, the buildings were closed and then sold at auction, and it became the civilian town of 1855, 1861 during leaving Kansas. And a fellow that some of you may know, James Montgomery, was there as a Free State Stater and abolitionist, and tried to deal with the folks that were at Fort Scott, because Fort Scott's in Brogan County. So where do you think most of the settlers of Fort Scott were from? Kentucky. And that's the only other Brogan County in the country. And so pre-Civil War, Kansas likes to talk about it was the real start of the Civil War. And, you know, that can be debated. And it's okay if you're in Kansas and you want to believe that, because it was brutal hand-to-hand stuff. You know, Quantrill came in with his guerrillas, and they burned down Lawrence, Kansas, and the Kansas Jayhawkers did the same thing going into Missouri. It was interesting when the University of Missouri joined the Southeast Conference, because in about like wartime print in the Kansas City Star newspaper, it said something like secession. The Missouri finally made it into the South, you know, joining the Southeast Conference with sports. You know, and it's like, wow, this is 150 years after the war, and, you know, it still has sentiment. And I don't know if it was the governor of Missouri or some folks in government drafted a letter to the University of Kansas demanding that they change that terroristic mascot name of Jayhawks, because they were pro-union or was ravaging Missouri. You know, so it was an interesting time, and having grown up in Philadelphia and having lived pretty much everywhere around the country, border to border, shore to shore, but never in the center of the nation, it was interesting to see how that history still lingers. Fort Scott was the largest town in southeast Kansas. It became militarized during the war. Missouri to the east, Arkansas to the southeast, Indian Territory, which was vacated by any Union troops that were there, and Texas troops moved in. Kansas was very much isolated, and Fort Scott was kind of that bastion defending that southeast flank of the state. So a lot of African Americans self-liberated and went to Fort Scott, and there were refugee camps all over the place. 1860, the year before the war started, everything was looking good. Kansas was getting stable in January of 1861. They thought peace was coming, and 2-3 months later, that was not the case. And John Brown was in Kansas, and that's where he started. He left, took some slaves with him, and ended up at Harper's Ferry. So there's that real tie. We don't think about the Western theater growing up in the Eastern theater of the war. And the Western theater was from the other side of the Appalachians to the Mississippi River. And that area beyond the Mississippi was the Trans-Mississippi Theater. And people say there was actually a war there. Yeah, it was not a clash of titans of army of 7,500,000 smashing heads like at Antietam and Gettysburg. But it was that nasty hand-to-hand close combat, no holds barred. And Kansas had a drought in 1860. They lost a quarter of their population. And here they are isolated on two sides. And, to the north, the Nebraska Territory and Iowa, they were not heavily populated. They were very vulnerable. And James Lane, crazy James Lane, one of the first senators and a brigadier general, decided we have all these able-bodied black men that we can cajole into service, willingly or unwillingly. That's a whole other story. But he organized the first Kansas color in 1862 in the summer. And he had a black captain, William Matthews from Leavenworth, who was a recruiting officer. He recruited about 85 black men, and he was essentially made a company commander, but when things were federalized, he was black. He went back to Leavenworth and continued to recruit. But the first Kansas colored elements of it was not a full regiment, went into battle at Island Mound, Missouri in late October 1862, which was 5-6 months before the 54th Mass was even thought about. So Fort Scott, we like to tell the story that the first Kansas Colored was really the first black unit organized by a northern state. It doesn't get its due because it was way out there in Trans-Mississippi that nobody knows about unless you're there. And the second Kansas Colored was organized there. And when they went in to fight Confederate guerrillas in Island Mound, Missouri, they were outnumbered 3-1, and they stood their ground. They suffered like 8 or 10 killed and 2-3 times as many wounded, but it got national coverage. And it was either, depending on what account you had, there were national correspondents, New York Times and Herald or whatever. It was either one of the Confederate guerrillas or one of the first Kansas colored officers that said, those black devils fought like tigers. Now, had they run, screaming and being a stereotypical black that white people thought about, not being able to soldier, there's no proof of it, but I'm convinced that got national coverage, and what the first Kansas Color did, that gave Lincoln the backbone to issue the Emancipation Proclamation, along with the fighting that occurred at Antietam. So, the opportunity that we have in Waverly with this corps is first rate. It deserves recognition and incorporation into the Underground Railroad Network of Freedom. We have abolitionists all through the area. There's a marker downtown Wilkes-Barre for abolitionists there. They just marked in the old Wilkes-Barre Cemetery across from the hospital. the black section, there's a bunch of USCT soldiers there, and one of the black fellows who was a Teamster for, I don't remember the abolitionist name, but he would, drive wagons north with slaves hiding under the hay and whatnot, and the Wilkes-Barre Historical Society, or the Luzerne County Historical Society, just marked his grave, and it, says as much. And they just had a nice ceremony there, maybe a month ago, I think. So, there's so much to talk about, and we just need to keep talking about it. So I'll conclude with that, but I really thank Billy and Jerry for organizing this. It really means a lot to me. I appreciate my wife Sue putting up with me having traveled about 10,500 miles since I took over in June, and just so many of you come. I've had the pleasure of being able to install officers for most of the camps, and I've asked Brother Mike and Brother Ted to fill in when we had installations on the same dates. I think the only camp, besides the one that is no longer a camp, the only camp that I have not been able to visit for any type of ceremony is, and in Ross 1 in Philadelphia. They're kind of tough to get a hold of too. Not that they're not involved, they do a lot of reenactments and do a lot of ceremonies, and that's great. I was to one of their ceremonies, must have been pre-COVID, I guess, outside Philadelphia in the cemetery 100 yards from where my mother was buried. So that was kind of like, in closing, my pastor always loved to say, no one can do everything, and I'm living proof of that, but everyone can do something. And if everyone did something, then everything would get done. So, I'm preaching to the choir because you're the guys that show up at encampments and keep your camps moving forward and keep being involved at the department level, keeping us moving forward. And I just encourage you to continue to do that. So again, I'm honored that you would take the time and expense to come to far off Scranton. Some may be further than others, but it's very heartfelt. So thank you very much.
Yeah. If I could add something real quick, for everybody who was driving out, the monument that you saw in EJ's presentation, this is South Washington Ave. If you literally...
This is North Washington.
North Washington. Washington Ave, yeah, if you literally just went out the parking lot, made a right about 2 blocks, 3 blocks, you won't miss it. You won't miss it. If you wanted to see the GAR post, it's Penn and Linden. It's about 6 blocks from here. You'll just have to go down to Penn Ave. Penn Ave turns into a one-way. When you get to the old building, which is a long story that I'd love to tell, but we're not getting into right now, why some of you did visit the museum today, that's where it all started, in that building, post 139. Long story is why we're not there anymore, but if you went and got to the building, if you made a left on Linden, it will bring you right back to Washington Ave. So if you're downtown, you want to see the GAR post, you kind of just have to go down to Penn and then just follow right back around. And once you get past the monument, just out Lackawanna Ave, and it'll take you right back to the expressway. So, thanks for coming.
Yes. Don't add something about the monument by the courthouse. Does anybody know how tall that is?
Not off the top of my head.
No, you don't have any idea. Joe Long told me,
Okay.
who was here, was in this camp for many years. That monument is 800 feet. There's 100 feet of it above ground. there's 700 feet down through the mines to get to solid ground.
Yeah.
So it's really, you look and say, wow, or something, but you look and say, what you can't see is even more amazing.
We're so glad you came to the Electric City. One of the reasons we are the Electric City is because of the streetcars, which actually started right here on Washington Avenue. And so this one, when we talk about going off the line and down the line, which is a big statement around here, which you know, we're going up the line and down the line, this was the line. So in my classroom, I teach Scranton history, and we have a picture of 1904, the streetcars going right down Washington Avenue. So this is where they went from here up to Greenwich. So that's why we are in Electric City. So if you go out here and you look at down Washington Avenue, you come to the monument. I need to thank a couple people other than Billy, and of course, Bill, Sue, thank you so much. It's a pleasure to meet you. So thank you so much for that. So, I need to thank Cooper's, and Janet, and their staff here, who've been wonderful. I've been here before because that was a sad story before my parents passed. This is where we have the luncheons. And the Coopers have always been very good friends to my family. And I think that if you haven't walked around here yet, or if you're leaving, if you go down the long hallway, you will see the tremendous history of the city. The walls, it's all over the place. If you need to use the bathrooms, the Beatles are in the bathroom down that hallway. And the Beach Boys are in the bathroom to that hallway. That's for the back. For the ladies, I heard it's Elvis. And Marilyn Monroe. So when you walk in, I kid you not, so that's the music that's being played in the bathroom. But this place has been here for almost 80 years at this point in time, so it's a wonderful place for people to come. And they have helped us out tremendously, so I thank their staff. One more thing. Thanks for helping with the museum. So, Bill and Sue took 100 hours to put the museum there, so if you haven't been there yet, they put a lot into that, so again, thank you. Paul, you're going to do our benediction and our closing.
I have one more thing. No, just one more, and then it's all off. Chris's mother, Susan, which many of you know, I want to thank her for pointing us in the right direction, because she was actually the first one to reach out to Jerry and I after Bill got promoted to commander and say, you guys have to do a testimonial different. Jerry and I were like, what? So, Susan, we owe a debt of thanks to her too, because she kind of sent some old programs and some information to kind of get Jerry and I the ball rolling with the program. And I thank her again. We can't thank her enough for the programs and the centerpieces and everything like that. That's all you got.
Brothers and sisters, if you would please rise, and we'll be dismissed with prayer. Let us pray together. Great Father, the almighty ruler of the universe, the lover of our souls, we thank you that we have been able to gather here today and honor our brother, Brother Bill, our commander. We thank you for the fellowship that we have enjoyed, and we thank you that we could just fellowship and enjoy this time together. We thank you for the country that we live in, and we thank you for the reminders of the payments that were made by our ancestors that we might have those freedoms that we enjoy. Dismiss us with your blessing. Many of us have to travel a long distance. We ask for your journeying mercies, that you would give us safety on the roads, protection in our cars, and Lord, that you would give us arrival home as soon as possible in all safety. Dismiss us with your blessing. Amen.
And I believe, you can call it up, might give it to them too. So some of you that have not been to an encampment, this will be a new thing. The Pennsylvania